Blog Talk Radio.
All right, everybody, our ATL Prime Sports debut here coming up on Mancini. Myself, Todd Corder, along with JJ, Wayne, our producer, and Mark Mancini in Los Angeles. Guys, we're talking college football, and let's start it off real quick. We all know about the cancellation of the Sun Belt Conference Championship game between Coastal Carolina and Louisiana Lafayette. Guys, what a shame. I think it's silly that they're going to call them co-champs since Coastal Carolina defeated Louisiana Lafayette earlier in the season. JJ, your thoughts first.
Yeah, with one positive test on the Coastal Carolina team, they're canceling the entire game. I think that's crazy for all the seniors, for all the players that have worked their 4 years off. And quite frankly, I think it's a sham to college football fans. This would be another ranked matchup in the Sun Belt Conference. So another chance to put a feather in the cap, have you, for Coastal Carolina in the New Year's Six, as you hear my daughter making her comments on it. She's unhappy about it. Jordan doesn't like it. I don't like it, TC. And I think, quite frankly, they could have found players that wanted to play that game. I think you could have done your contract tracing and still played the game, but they haven't done that this year from a countrywide standpoint. So that's a shame for both schools, and it's also a shame that they're calling them co-champions. But in the long thing of things, if it came down to it, if Tulsa upsets Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina will get the bid because they have the higher ranking, and they will be considered the playoff champion of the Sun Belt in the rankings. I was just reading the article on the old ESPN, so hopefully maybe that happens for Coastal Carolina. They get a New Year's Six games, but it's not looking good.
All right, Wayne, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and just say Coastal Carolina is the champion of the Sun Belt Conference, regardless of what other people are saying. As far as how Cincinnati's going to be affected, I really believe they're going to beat Tulsa, and that won't be an issue.
Mark?
Well, I'll tell you, I agree with you, Wayne. And, when we start getting into this college football on the show here on the debut of the ATL Prime Sports podcast, we'll really let everybody know how we feel. And I'm going to really light a dynamite keg on it because I got some big thoughts on where this thing is headed come the new year, Todd.
Well, and it's a shame because, the Sun Belt has really done really well this season. Louisiana Lafayette defeated Iowa State earlier, and then Coastal Carolina defeated Louisiana Lafayette earlier in the season. Yet you have, because let's just talk about the rankings. We'll segue right into it here on ATL Prime Sports with myself, Todd Corder, along with our producer, Wayne. JJ in Atlanta, Wayne's in Memphis, and Marcus in Los Angeles. Let's segue right over to the college football playoff standings. I don't call it a playoff. I call it an invitational because back to what I was saying, Louisiana Lafayette, they beat Iowa State, and then of course Coastal Carolina, they defeated Louisiana Lafayette. Yet Iowa State is ranked above each one of them, and they have 2 losses in the season, and they're 6. Coastal Carolina's like 13, and Louisiana Lafayette's 19. Gentlemen, this makes absolutely no sense at all. JJ, tell me what you and your daughter think.
Well, as you hear Jordan, she's disgusted with this one too. You mentioned the rankings, and within the last 2 hours, we actually got some breaking news in the top of the rankings. Notre Dame coach Brian Kelly, if they go to the Rose Bowl, he has threatened to not play in the college football playoffs. Why? Because they don't have access to friends and families being at the stadium. So he says if they make the Rose Bowl, there's a chance the Notre Dame Fighting Irish might not play in the playoffs. Wow. That's something else on these rankings here.
JJ, real quick, that is a wild moment, but I think Notre Dame's going to play. I think that the guys
I
gonna
agree,
play,
but it's just something to put for food for thought. That is,
right,
if they do make the playoffs and they do play in the Rose Bowl, what's going to happen if they declare not to? So that's something at the top of the rankings. You mentioned the rankings. Head-scratching moments. You already mentioned one, Coastal Carolina being far down as 13 in some polls, and the one that matters 12 in the college football playoff as we stand right now, and the 19 ranking next to Louisiana. Coastal Carolina is unbeaten. Louisiana has a better record. Here sits Iowa State at number 6 with 2 losses, and they lost to the Sun Belt co-champion in Louisiana, Raging Cajuns. So the rankings are head-scratching to me. As a Georgia fan, I'm pretty sure they're a top 10 team. But you know what? The rankings this year, I don't know if that's where they should be. TCU and I talked about that off air. I think Cincinnati deserves to be ahead of Georgia for their ranking, and they're playing in the AAC, a great conference this year. So I think the rankings are all out of whack, and that's the only reason I brought into the breaking news from Notre Dame. Just I thought it was kind of settling here to talk about it in this circumstance. So lots of head-scratching rankings all over the place this year.
You know what? They ought to just move the games out of the Rose Bowl, put them on the East Coast, put the college football playoff in a bubble, and have it in Florida and have fans in the stands and spread them out. Wayne, what's your opinion, A, on the rankings, and B, what's your opinion on what Brian Kelly said, and C, what's your opinion on moving it to the East Coast where they'd have fans in the stands and they could have a bubble and not make these teams travel as far?
Well, I think I'm just going to comment on the rankings on whether they should move it to the East Coast. As far as the rankings go, I really think that the fourth team in that playoff should be Cincinnati. And Michael Oresco, the commissioner for the AAC, has put forward he wants to go back to the old BCS computer and just have 2 teams play for the championship because he feels like that's more fair. I have the opinion that they need to go back to the old system, play all the games, play all the bowl games. The writers and the coaches vote for who's number 1, and that's it. As far as where the game should be played, I think it needs to be played in a place where they can have fans in the stands.
And spread them out. Mark, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm going to comment on the rankings, but I got to totally agree with Wayne on spread it out in a place where they can have the fans in the stands. But as far as this college football thing is, it's a complete travesty. It's a joke. When you looked at all the other sports, they expanded. They brought more teams in. The NCAA should have brought in 8 teams for this college football thing. I'd have loved to see Cincinnati, Texas A&M, Florida in the mix. And now we got 4. And to me, I'm going to tell you guys this, just my opinion. I think Ohio State's a hype train. I think Notre Dame's a hype train. I think when the dust clears, it's all about the SEC and the ACC. It'll be Clemson and Alabama settling this, and they're far above the rest of these things. And I'll just throw this out to you, Todd, before I move it over to you. Anybody tells me about Notre Dame this, Notre Dame that, Notre Dame took Clemson to overtime in their backyard without Trevor Lawrence. Now they have Trevor Lawrence. We'll see what happens. The rules have been slated in favor of Ohio State. They play a minimum, supposedly, amount of games, and then they come in here, and now we're going to bring them into the mix. I'm telling you, and I'm saying this for a lot of years, to me, Ohio State and Notre Dame have been hype trains. And that's just my opinion. Todd?
Well, then let's go ahead and segue into our next subject here on ATL Prime Sports. You can listen in 2 ways. 1-347-205-9631. We're getting on www.blogtalkradio.com. You can send us your opinions. You can definitely do that to us. We will read them on the air. Our next show will be Friday, January 8th at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, noon out in Central, 11 in Mountain, and 10 a.m. out on the West Coast, along with myself Wayne, our producer in Memphis, JJ on the other side of the ATL, and Mark out in La La Land in Los Angeles. I want to thank Mark Mancini for making all this possible. We'll be on Mancini Media next year, and also we'll have a show on Mondays that is not live but will be recorded, and you'll be able to check it out on YouTube. All right, the next subject, gentlemen, the playoff, the standings the way it is. Alabama's 1, Notre Dame is 2, Clemson is 3, Ohio State is 4. There's a lot of scenarios. Texas A&M is 5. They've got Cincinnati all the way behind, like JJ said, Iowa State, and 2 others. That would be Florida and Georgia. Guys, in your opinion, where does Cincinnati belong? And B, do they have it right? And C, if Ohio State slips up, does A&M take that slot, or does Cincinnati, or does anyone else? JJ, go ahead.
Well, you know, I'm all for the top 4. I think Ohio State's the top 4 team in the country, but I don't know if their ranking deserves to be there with the full body of work. But I'll put them there right now because of Justin Fields and that offense is looking really explosive. I like where A&M is at 5. Iowa State's where it starts scratching my head because you remember they do have 2 losses, one of them to Louisiana. Louisiana's got a much better record. I'm not saying they're a top 10 team, but it's just a weird year. So in my honest opinion, I think that's where you should put Cincinnati. You should put Cincinnati at 6. Then you could go Georgia or Florida. You could flip-flop either one of them. I do think the Dogs are a better team right now, but we'll give Florida the nod. So I'd go Cincinnati 6, Florida 7, Georgia 8. I'd go Indiana at 9, and I'd probably give Coastal Carolina the nod and give them a top 10 bid. That's just where I would stand. I think the rankings are pretty straightforward at the top. But you got to give these small schools credit for going on the road and beating these Big 12 schools. And I'm talking Coastal Carolina. I'm talking Louisiana. I'm talking the Sun Belt. You got to give them credit for winning their out-of-conference schedule and doing it in dramatic fashion. Iowa State got beat by, I believe, 17 that week 1 against Louisiana. That's no fluke. I think if they played that game 9 out of 10 times, Louisiana's going to win that game 9 out of 10 times. They dominated on both sides of the ball for much of the game. So I kind of, that's where my rankings are, guys. Like I said, I'd put Cincinnati at 6, Florida 7, Georgia 8, and I'd slide Coastal Carolina in there at 10. That's my rankings. Other than that, I'm pretty good with it.
Wayne, what do you think?
Well, I will put Alabama 1, and I'll put Notre Dame 2. Clemson 3, but I put Cincinnati 4. And the only way I see Ohio State sneaking in, under my opinion, would be if Notre Dame were to beat Clemson a second time, which would knock Clemson out because you can't have a 2-loss team up there. And then you would have Alabama, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, and Ohio State.
I can deal with
Interesting.
According to Dabo, if they lose, they're in.
Clemson loses, they're out. Mark, what do you think?
Of course.
Well, I would basically, agree with what Wayne was saying, but I'd take Notre Dame and Ohio State out of the mix. I'd bring Texas A&M and Cincinnati in that thing. And I don't understand Coastal Carolina, 11-0, great year. I understand everything. I mean, but why aren't they in the mix in Power 5 or whatever the heck they want to look at it like? But USC is over here sitting in a good position. They're saying they're undefeated. They didn't play Alabama this year. They didn't play, some of the powerhouses. They're playing Oregon tonight. But, it's funny when we create gray areas in college football. And everybody can bash Nick Saban and say, this and that about him. That is the pipeline for the NFL. They are the next. If you looked at the NFL with 32 teams, that is the 33rd team is Alabama. Every year they're there. They've only been knocked out of the college football for 1 year, and that was last year. Look at Mac Jones. He comes in. Look at Tua. Go back to McLaren. I mean, this is just a pipeline of talent. Their wide receivers and everything. It's Alabama and everybody else, in my book, Just my opinion. Todd?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's so many scenarios. Obviously, the way they've got it set up is it's the Power 5. They don't respect enough of the Group of 5. You see that where they're putting Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina in, etc. So, if here's how the deal is. If Clemson loses, they're out, no doubt. And if A&M wins, they're in. Now, if Clemson loses and Ohio State loses, then you know what? We've got a little more chaos. And the way it's looking, Florida, according to the playoff scenario, they only moved down one slot. So if they upset Alabama, then, you know, and say Clemson wins over Notre Dame, then, you know, you're going to have two SEC and two ACC in. Is it going to be A&M? Is it going to be Florida? So, I mean, I got to give Notre Dame a lot of credit for beating Clemson the first time around with or without Trevor Lawrence. DJ threw for 450, and, you know, Clemson's D gave up 47. Yes, they were missing key players, but I don't think folks are giving Notre Dame enough credit. So we'll find out. Guys, we're at the halfway point of the show. You can reach us at ATL Prime Sports on Twitter. You can reach me at Quarter Todd, CORDERTODD. You can reach JJ at JJ Get You One. Wayne, we can reach you at RWY Jr. And Mark, we can reach you at Mancini Sports. Guys, you know, this would have, JJ said, he said it all along, this would have been the year to expand the college football playoff on a trial basis because of the pandemic. I agree with JJ. They didn't do it. This is the way this system is. My take on the system is, I'm going to say it real quick. We need to have an automatic Power 5 conference champion. You win your conference championship in the Power 5, you're in 2 wild cards. Let the committee get together for that. And the last spot needs to go to the best team in a group of 5. This way we take out the computers and we pretty much take out the committee except for 2 wild cards. JJ, what's your thought? Then we'll go to Wayne and Mark.
I would absolutely love that. You know, I have stuck with my theory. I would love more teams. I would love 8 or 12 teams. I don't know if that'll ever happen. I would love to see, and you mentioned it, I would love to see the committee just go, you know what, we're going to make the New Year's 6 a 12-team playoff this year and give it a test and see if this thing can be done. Obviously, it didn't happen. I like a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-team playoff. Your Power 5 champions get in. Your best group of 5 gets in. Now, I would also admit I like Notre Dame in the ACC. I'd really like them to stay there. I think it'd be good for college football, but I don't think they'll stay. Maybe just at least it just would entertain me to see them go into a conference full time. I think it'd be good for college football. I think it'd take a lot of the committee out of it if you were to do a 16 playoff, like I said, because then they're in a conference. They don't have to be the best group of 5 or an independent team out there, and you can give these other guys a shot. But it is what it is. We got 4 teams this year, and I tend to agree with Mancini over there. I think it is going to boil down to Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Alabama.
What do you think, Wayne?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I've always stood behind is my, I guess, slight conspiracy theory that a lot of these decisions are made by the networks who carry the games and which teams they want in there to draw more ad revenue. And that's
Correct.
one reason why I want to go back to that old system where they play all the games, they play all the bowl games, then the sports writers, the coaches vote, and if you don't like who's number 1, take it up with the sports writers and the coaches, and that kind of takes all of the network's little input out of it.
Well, you know what, Wayne, that's a good point, but the networks still have an input. that way?
What's that?
Looks like he's breaking up there.
Yeah, I didn't.
But you know what? And let me jump in on this one, Wayne and JJ. And I agree with you, JJ. I think it's coming down to like what I said, Alabama and Clemson. And what you're basically saying is, Wayne, is what I've been saying all along. The only reason I feel Notre Dame and Ohio State are in here, it's that not only do they travel well, you can't really travel in this pandemic, but it's money. It's money for the network. So they're not going to knock those teams out. You start bringing Cincinnati into this, you start bringing Texas A&M, they don't draw like these schools do. Unless you're talking about the Longhorns or Oklahoma or, you know, maybe a USC or something like that. They want powerhouses, and they'll slight it any way to get these schools in. Ohio State doesn't deserve it, and basically, you know, you start creating new rules on the fly. When you look at Notre Dame, who the hell Notre Dame is beating? They smashed my Pitt team, and Pitt was an embarrassment this year after starting out 3-0. They beat a Clemson team without Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you go down the ladder here. Who really has Notre Dame beat? It's just a big money grab in my book. Todd?
No.
Well, Notre Dame, gentlemen, they've had the same schedule as Clemson. So it'll be, you know what? It'll be settled on the field tomorrow for the ACC championship. That is, the guys right now are testing today. These games aren't set in stone, as we know in this COVID-19 environment, until we get to tomorrow and you actually see them on the doggone field. Like I said, we're already missing the Sun Belt championship game. We got about 8 minutes left in the show. Guys, let's go ahead and go to our picks, if you don't mind. We're going to pick each conference championship game. Let's go ahead and start out with in my opinion, the best conference in college football, Alabama and Florida. Go ahead, JJ, you go first, and pick your winner, and briefly why. Briefly.
Well, the spread on this one right now sits at 17.5, I believe. I like the Tide. I like Mac Jones. I like the wide receiver. It could be a trio if you still had Waddle in there, but they got a great duo. Smith out there breaking records. Mac Jones looking great. Najee Harris running the rock. Nick Saban's coaching. Honestly, one of the best coaching jobs I think he's done. Is very underrated. He's blown everybody out. They've scored 40-plus points, and let's go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight games. They've scored 40 points. Folks, that's the entire season except for Missouri. Guess what they opened the season with against Missouri? A 38-19 victory. So it's just unbelievable the amount of points their offense is putting up. Their defense is putting it together. TC, you mentioned it off air. If you take away their 48-point outburst, Ole Miss's 48-point outburst against Alabama, they might have the best defense in the country points-wise, and that's why I like Alabama. It's just Mac Jones and the whole entire show around him, the great offensive line, the defense is sticking to it, and it's Nick Saban. Alabama cruises to an SEC championship. I say they cover the spread. I think it'll be about 21, 23 points.
Wayne, what about you?
Well, I'm taking Alabama to beat the spread, even though Florida has a very sneaky coach. I think Alabama's going to win, and they're going to remember to bring some extra cleats.
That's right. That's right, Mark. What do you think?
I'll tell you one thing. When I look at this is such a mismatch. I have a better chance of starting for the Los Angeles Clippers to start the season than Florida has to beat Alabama. Come on, man. Alabama smashed all their opponents in double digits. Like JJ referred to, they got the quarterback, they got the running backs, they got the wide receivers, they got the coach, and Saban has done it every year. I mean, when was the last time you seen Alabama down? And people talk about USC in the heyday and everything. Give me a break. USC can't hold a lick to these guys, even with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and all those guys. Because when those guys left, what happened to the program? So when you look at this situation here, Alabama destroys them. And I might go on and up a couple with Wayne saying this thing's going to be over by halftime. They're going to win this game by at least 25.
I think Alabama covers. Defense wins championships. Alabama has the best defense in the SEC. They've only allowed more than 20 points twice this season. I think they cover. Let's go to the next one. We got to do it quicker, gentlemen. The ACC championship game, Notre Dame and Clemson. JJ, give me your winner quickly.
I'm going Clemson. Trevor Lawrence is back. They were out two key defensive players in that first game, too, against Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame throws for as many yards and rushes for as many yards as they did. I think Clemson steps up. Trevor Lawrence comes in. He's a general on the field. He's another coach out there. And this isn't just a quarterback, a college quarterback, folks. This is a generational talent. You're talking the first overall pick in the NFL draft next year, or the next year if he decides to play a senior year, which I don't think he will, but it's still an option. Here we go. Trevor Lawrence, they take it down. As I mentioned earlier on our show, the second best team in the ACC is Notre Dame. Clemson by a landslide.
Wayne, what do you got?
I've got Dabo Swinney, foot on the gas. He's going to dismantle Notre Dame and tear their playhouse down.
All right, so you guys have them covering the 10.5 mark. What do you have?
Everything runs in threes. I'm not going against them guys. Those guys must be drinking the same cup of coffee I drank a couple hours ago. A lot of cream, a lot of sugar. So Clemson's going to win this one, my friends.
All right, guys, I'm going the opposite. I've got the Irish in an upset. They got a better defense than Clemson. Let's go. We got two games, and we got less than 4 minutes. Quickly, let's go to Ohio State and Northwestern. JJ.
I'm going with the Buckeyes, although I do think Northwestern's sneaky good on both sides of the football. Their quarterback takes care of the football. They're well coached, and that can keep you in a game against Ohio State, who has given up some points on the defensive side of the ball. That might be their only question mark. Northwestern falls short. I think Ohio State in a close one. I'll take the Buckeyes.
So you got Northwestern covering the 20. What about you, Wayne?
Absolutely.
I've got Northwestern winning the game against Ohio State because they've got a chip on their They got a chip on their shoulder.
Well, they do have the second best defense in the Big Ten. What do you got, Mark?
Yeah, I got to agree with Wayne on that one. To make it quick, I don't really care, but I'm agreeing with Wayne on that choice.
All right, so we've got two Northwestern. I'll go the Buckeyes in a route. They've got to impress the playoff committee. They've got to be able to cover the 20. I think they do. Our last one here, we got less than 2 minutes left in the show. The Pac-12 championship game, which is tonight. Washington can't play, so it's Oregon and USC. JJ, what do you got quickly?
Boy, this is a type of game where you expect Oregon to be all big and mighty and come in undefeated, but they're not the Oregon we've seen of the last 2 years with Herbert. They don't have that star quarterback right now. I like the Trojans. I think they get it done. They're going to be in consideration for that 4th spot if they do it impressively enough.
All right, what about you, Wayne?
I'm taking USC. They've got the pride on the line.
All right, so you got USC to cover. What do you have, Mark?
Well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I don't know how the hell they beat Arizona State. Then they pulled one at Arizona. I had UCLA last week to beat them. UCLA forgot how to tackle people. I think the train comes to a halt. I got Oregon.
I've got Oregon too, guys. I've got Oregon to upset USC, and if USC wins, they've got no shot Final Four, even if they go 6-0. Guys, it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Listen to our show. The next show will be on the 8th of January. ATL Prime Sports. Catch us here. Catch us on, we have a show on Monday. You can catch the replay on Tuesday on YouTube. For myself, for Mark Mancini in Los Angeles, for JJ on the other side of the ATL, For Wayne, our producer in Memphis, I'm Todd Corder, driving through the mountains of West Virginia, heading to Mark's direction there, Pennsylvania, for Christmas on his old stomping grounds. Guys, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for your time. Enjoy the games on Saturday. Good day, everyone.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you, brother.
Get you one.